Well, good morning everybody, or good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you are. Today I'm going to talk about chimeras. What do you know about chimeras? Are these just something that science and history has relegated to ancient mythology? Then I'd like to ask you the question, why, when we study history, why do we see a lot of chimeras drawn? In ancient Egypt, we have human-animal chimeras, or the gods, some with human, sometimes head of a wolf. Where do you get the idea from these things? Were they just an idea from the mists of mythology, or was more to it than that? Do such things actually exist? And why did the so-called ancient pharaohs of Egypt have cone heads and these elongated skulls? It seems that the Egyptians were hiding their elongated skulls. So who were these Egyptians? Actually, I'll state here, I do not believe that the Egyptians built the pyramids. Not at all, and the science is bringing that out too. Yeah, the pyramids were built a lot further back in time. And there seemed to be a race of beings back there, of human chimeras of all sorts. And what about animal chimeras? Do they exist? Well, there's many accounts of these things from all over the world. Today I'm just going to read you a couple of examples from my books, JASHER Insights, some quite remarkable ones actually. And here is the first example. This is alright, so this is from my book, JASHER Insights, Book 2, Chapter 61. And the scene is, I will just read it here, it's about this guy called Zepho, who was the grandson of Esau, and he was a great warrior, great fighter. I'll just read straight from the book, verse 14 onwards. And it was on one day that Zepho lost a young heifer. And he went to seek it, and he heard it lowing round about the mountain. And Zepho went, and he saw, and behold, there was a large cave at the bottom of the mountain, and there was a great stone there at the entrance of the cave. And Zepho split the stone, and he came into the cave, and he looked, and behold, a large animal was devouring the ox. From the middle upwards it resembled a man. From the middle downwards it resembled an animal. And Zepho rose up against the animal and slew it with his swords. Because of that, he became a king. People practically worshipped this guy who could kill these massive chimeras. Verse 6. Comment 6. Here we have a story about hybrids or half-human animal hybrids. Quite an amazing story. We also read about other human-animal chimeras, which you can find earlier in this book. How did they come into being after the Great Flood? Well, we knew there were gods and demigods and chimeras and all kinds of stuff and all kind of critters, strange things on the earth before the flood. But how did they get back here after the flood? How did they come into being after the Great Flood? We know that they had existed in pre-flood times, but how did they come into existence after the Great Flood? It's not the first time that I have heard about these type of creatures hiding in caves. Yes, there was a giant. Well, this one wasn't a chimera, it was just a massive giant, something like 25 feet high. This was recently. There was a giant some 30 feet high, found alive in a cave in Afghanistan by US Special Forces. It was very big and devoured some of the American soldiers. I bit the head off. See a picture of that. Were finally being killed. Yeah, using normal automatic weapons, they couldn't kill him. they had to use something else to take out this giant. Well, rather strange. I have a feeling it's because these things, what happens is the Special Forces of Russia, the Spetsnaz, and also American Special Forces, say that in areas of great conflict or war, sometimes these strange portals open, and these giant creatures come through and destroy everything in sight. That's what both sides have experienced. I don't know, I haven't been there, I haven't seen it in person but it's quite strange that our Special Forces of America and Russia would report these things. You can look it up. Portals and giants emerging to devour everything in sight. Very dangerous creatures. Now it seems to me, as long as they stay close to the portal, they're all right. But obviously American forces managed to lure this particular giant out of his protection zone, and they did finally manage to kill it. And I took it back to the States, what they did after that. Well, you can look at Steve Quayle to find out more about that on www.genesis6giants.com. But continuing about this particular episode of my book, comment 7. The first Chimera story is in my book in chapter 36. This is also another human-animal chimera, but the other way round, different. What I mean by that is, well, some human-animal chimera, the top half of them seems to be human, the bottom half animal, sometimes the other way round, as is the case here. JASHER 36, 31, 32. Afterward, about 120 great terrible animals came out from the wilderness at the other side of the sea. This is after there was a big storm. And they all came to the place where the asses were, and they placed themselves there. Well, I had these people were taking care of these animals, and suddenly there was a big storm, and after that this massive, strange creatures came around, and those animals from the middle downward were in the shape of the children of men, or humans, and from the middle upwards, some had the likeness of bears, some had the likeness of keepers, whatever that is, with tails behind them, from between their shoulders, reaching down to the earth, like the tails of Duchipath. And these animals came and mounted and rode upon these asses and led them away, and they went away unto this day. Comment 8. Comparison. In the above mentioned two examples of human-animal hybrids, they were both very different from each other in form. First type are human-animal hybrids, and the second type are animal-human hybrids. Very odd descriptions of mythological creatures. Some had heads, and the top half of the creature is an animal, and the bottom half is a human, while the other type had the top half a human, the bottom half is a beast. Comment 9. Hybrids is a very big topic, which I covered in detail in my book Enoch Insights. Comment 10. Transhumanism. There's quite a contrast between why hybrids of all sorts came into being in pre-flood times, as opposed to why scientists today would want to tinker around with genetic engineering and transhumanism. Yes, they're trying to do it again, or make strange things again. Comment 11. Anyone who's watched any kind of superheroes such as X-Men or Superman or Batman or Spider-Man will get the idea that man wants to make himself greater than he has been created by God. Why? How to do it? That's right. That's taken from my book there, and I'll read just a little bit more here in the first episode that I mentioned. Right, it says here. Comment 1. Here we see the chimeras, but different from what we have heard before in mythology, as the top half of these creatures are as animals and the bottom half as the legs of humans. This then enables them to ride off on the backs of the asses and lead them away. Very strange description, but not completely impossible, as many odd things happened after the Great Flood, including the same fallen angels' demonic powers interfering with the DNA of both mankind and animals. Origin of the demons. The demons originally came into being as the disembodied spirits of the pre-flood giants, who were in turn the sons of the union between fallen angels and the women on the earth. According to the book of Enoch, see my book Enoch Insights, the process of harvesting DNA is today in modern times known as alien abductions and cattle mutilations. Some non-human entities are in the spare body parts business. Some say they're aliens, but I believe they're simply demons masquerading as aliens for the purpose of ensnaring and beguiling modern scientific men. There's one verse I didn't read you. And one of these creatures approached Anna and smote him with his tail, then fled from that place. We will meet these creatures. Comment 3. These are indeed very strange verses. Where did these chimeras come from? What was the purpose in creating a type of chimera with animal heads and human legs, like the faun in the book Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe by C.S. Lewis? Many would think, I was always taught that fauns and other types of chimeras were creatures from mythology, or really imaginary creatures. Well, as you can see from the story above, apparently they are in fact real. Until about the guy who saw all this. When he saw this, he was exceedingly afraid for his life, and he fled and escaped to the city. And he related to his sons and his brothers all that happened to him, and many men went to seek the asses but could not find them. And Anna and his brothers went no more to that place from that day forward, for they were greatly afraid for their lives. Comment 4. Why do you suppose the men were so greatly afraid of these chimeras to the point the men would not go near that place where the chimeras had been seen? It's not like the men had heard somewhere the chimeras were evil creatures and had something to do with the fallen angels from before the great flood. These men could not explain to themselves how these creatures had come into being again, therefore they were terrified, just at the thought of the chimeras having returned to their lands. I suppose in modern terms it would be like if one of us saw a UFO at close range. We'd probably try to get as far away from it as possible, because in our mind it shouldn't exist, and it certainly shouldn't be there right in front of me. Humans generally have a very hard time accepting the unknown or the paranormal. Again, paranormal means just outside the normal. Wow. To know more about chimeras, see my book, Enoch Insights. Well, that's just a little bit about chimeras. Well, there's something else I want to mention is, apart from American forces and Russian forces sometimes seeing portals and massive giants coming out of them, if that's true, why is it happening? Why are strange things happening in modern times? I noted, by the way, that in both the cases by the Russian force and Americans who saw portals open with massive giant come out, that it was in areas of great conflict, thus the Spetsnaz, Russian forces, and the American Special Force. Area of war, conflict, death, killing, that sort of thing. Angel of death, right? Well, I just checked these two stories in my books, JASHER Insights, book 1 and 2. Same thing's the case. One of the guys there, Zephyr, was a warrior king, and they were fighting big battles right at that time. And the same with the other example. There was a great conflict going on. It digresses to that little story about the asses being stolen by chimeras, but actually there's a big war going on. It just shows that little story there in the midst of it all. So again, it shows that these strange, odd things, paranormal things like chimeras, portals, giants coming through, often happens in these areas of great spiritual conflict and great number of people dying in war, suffering, like the Middle East, for example. Seems to open portals. I mean, maybe it's the angel of death, maybe it's a spectre, seems like. Now I'm going to tell you something that I don't think I've told you before. Maybe I have, I can't remember. But believe it or not, I myself, well, I tell you, I live in a very strange place. And I've seen a lot of strange paranormal things here, without even trying, I might add. And I only learned in a couple of years ago, it's because where we live, down the backbone of the US no, sorry, I don't live in the US. in the backbone of the UK, we live on what's called one of the ley lines, and it seems to attract a lot of these sort of happenings, odd happenings, paranormal happenings. And there's only 10 of these lines in the world. They're about every 2,500 miles apart. These are I'm talking about the longitudinal line, the long ones. There's a lot of smaller ones, horizontal ones, and there are others, like spokes of a wheel. You can find smaller ones in the country too. But the main ones, the vertical ones, they are approximately every 2,500 miles. There's about 10 of them on the planet. We just happen to be on one. And so is Stonehenge, far below us there in England. And then the next one's in the mid-Atlantic drift there to the west. And the next one west of that is in North America. And at the top end, that's so happens that's where they had the Philadelphia experiment on that. And if you go further south, you find it's where the Bermuda Triangle is. So man knows about these powers of these ley lines, these spiritual areas, these places where there's more portals and more paranormal activity. And I will say there are also UFO spots, as I mentioned before. But there's more to it than that. Whilst I've lived in this house, I've lived in this house 17 years, I've seen some pretty odd things, hard to explain. And I'll tell you this little tale about one day seeing a chimera. Yes, I've seen one. It really freaked me out. I wasn't prepared for what I saw. So anyway, I was going up in the forest on my bicycle. I love cycling. So I was cycling up to high ground, and I get to a certain stage where you can't cycle anymore, so I start climbing up the hills, or mountain you might say, up this mountain, or small mountain. And I was climbing up this steep side where it's got some brush there, you know, bushes and stuff. I'm climbing up there, and then next to me there's a sort of like ravine, a very small ravine, and then there's continuous big hills going up, and that's had a lot of trees on that side. Well, I was almost at the top there. Unfortunately, I just happened to look over the ravine, and I can't tell you how far away. It's difficult to know. Fortunately, it wasn't right close. But maybe it was maybe something like 50 yards away. Yeah, something like 50 yards away. And there, stationary, on the side of the hill, was this massive creature. Oh no, it wasn't some small little pussycat or something, or a dog or something. This thing was massive. It's really strange to see. With paranormal experiences, it's like you see and yet you don't see. That's the only way I can put it. Or you can see part of the time and then you can't. I don't know why. It was a very odd experience. But anyway, in focusing on it, and of course, once you see that, you want to get out there in a hurry. It might be dangerous. You don't know. That's your reaction. I'd say it looked like a tiger, but not with the stripes. But the colours were wrong for a normal type of big cat. And it seemed as though the end of this massive cat was different than it should be. The back legs were different, as though they had like the back legs of a wolf or something. It didn't make sense what I was seeing. Anyway, I wasn't going to stick around. That thing must have been, and I bite and got out there as fast as I could. I mean, something like that happens to you that your mind can't fathom it, because your mind cannot identify what you're seeing, and it really freaks you out. And then you immediately think, that's dangerous. I'm getting out of here. So I did. Now you can just dismiss that as I had a vivid imagination or something, or maybe I was on the wrong kind of something. But no, I don't take drugs and stuff like that, and neither do I drink. So it wasn't that. I really saw that creature. Now the thing is, did we ever hear about this creature again? Well, was there any evidence that it was seen again? Well, strangely enough, it just so happened that I think it was a week, 10 days later, we needed to go to this place that wasn't far away from where we live, another village not so far away, and we had to leave our cats there while we went on holiday or something, and leave these cats at this place. And I just happened to be talking to the lady there that took care of these cats, and I said, oh, it reminds me of something I saw 10 days ago. She said, what did you see? I saw this strange cat-like creature. It was massive, like 2 meters long, but it was just different. It was just different than anything I've heard of or seen. Like a combination creature, like a chimera. And she says, well, that's odd you say that, because something happened to my son similar. My son, recently, he saw this cat-like creature, really big, like you're describing. And you see that wall over there? It was like a really high wall, about 2 meters high. That thing leapt clear over that wall there, and my son saw it. So I had the confirmation I wanted. I wasn't seeing things or imagining things. There was such a thing. Now, where that kind of creature came from, I couldn't tell you. I've heard some strange stories in the 70s of people having these wild cats and letting them loose in the wild because there came these taxes on fancy pets and big creature stuff. But the thing is, I know what I saw wasn't completely a cat. It was a combination creature. How it's done, I couldn't tell you. Is somebody around this area messing around with DNA? Is somebody messing around with DNA of creatures and trying to make these old chimeras, or did it come from somewhere else? I don't know. I haven't heard anything about it since. But I know that one of my daughters has also seen some odd creatures around here at different times. So that was my experience with seeing a chimera. That was probably about 10 years ago. But I thought I'd mention that the chimeras do exist because I've seen one. It was just there. Freaked me out, totally freaked me out. I couldn't get home fast enough on my bicycle, I'll tell you. Well, if you want to know more about chimeras, then do get my books, ENOCH Insights, JASHER Insights 1 and 2. They talk about chimeras in detail and the origin of chimeras. And do get my new book, Out of the Bottomless Pit 2, because that talks a lot about the paranormal. Paranormal just meaning outside the normal, not something woohoo and scary and stuff. And if you yourself have seen some odd things, like here I've seen UFOs at least 4 times where I live. If you see anything like that, UFOs, chimeras, giants, hopefully you won't see giants, anything like that, and many other topics on the paranormal, then do write to me, tell me about it. Maybe I'll talk about it with others. You can write to me at stephen@btinternet.com. That's stephen@btinternet.com. And tell me any experiences like that, and we'll talk to others about it. Well, thanks for listening. Bye for now.